Good morning, I would say. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. I see that people are joining us. We already have the 8 participants, which is great, and we're constantly letting people in. So maybe just a few seconds for the rest of the people to log in, and then we will start. Okay, they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. Okay, I would suggest that we start and people will be joining, but at least we started more or less on time. So bonjour à tous, dear participant. Thank you very much for being here. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce you to this event. I hope that the technology works. We're using for the first time Interprefy, which is an innovative platform that should be graphically appealing and most importantly should provide simultaneous translation into French and vice versa. So really feel free to speak either French or English and translation provided. I hope it works and that you could set it up. Plus, you've received a PDF describing how to use this platform. And in case of any doubt, do not hesitate to contact us or our technicians by clicking on the symbol down below in the chat box. Exactly. For your information, this event will be recorded and will later be available on our share webs. Okay, I think that was it concerning housekeeping rules. Let me come to the content of today's event. Today's event will focus on innovative approaches to digitalization and inclusive learning. What do we mean by inclusive learning? We mean basic education, vocational skills development, and lifelong learning. So the goal of today's session is on the one hand to present you with what has been achieved in the last 1.5 years in the domain of digitalization and inclusive learning, and on the other hand to enrich the discussion on how to ensure quality education and training for all using innovative solutions. So that's really the goal. And this event is really the result of a work of many colleagues and partner organizations, which together with the Education Network and the Inclusive Economic Development Network, during the more than 1.5 year, have exchanged, gathered relevant experience and shared best practices, lessons learned, their difficulties, and much other in this community of practice. So thank you very much. Let me express my thanks to all the people that were involved in this community of practice. Thanks also to Urs Goebiel from the Swiss Network for Education Innovation, which accompanied us in this endeavor, and Lars Büchler from the EAD team for the very pleasant and close collaboration. So really, this is like kind of a conclusive event in which we share the results of this community of practices, present the main findings, and really important, we also will be presenting 2 tools that have been developed. And those are, on the one hand, a case collection of 16 innovative projects that have used ICT technologies in education and VST projects, and a technical guide on how to develop effective and sustainable ICT-based educational solutions. So we hope that these tools will be helpful for your daily work, and a translation into French of the tech guide is planned, and as soon as we will have it, we will share it with you. Coming to the agenda, as you can see, as you saw from the previous slide, we have a very rich list of guests from SDC, within the SDC, at headquarters, in the field, and we're really looking forward to this exchange. Just to briefly go through the agenda, we will first of all have an input from our colleague from the Knowledge, Learning and Culture Division, Pascal, which will frame Switzerland's international cooperation engagement in digitalization in broader terms. Then we will have an input from Urs and from some experts, and we will then listen to 3 concrete examples of successful innovative projects, and then we will have plenty of time, or at least some time, for rich discussion for about half an hour. And there, really do not hesitate to either ask your questions in the chat box, using the chat box, or just like write your name and we will give you the floor. Or also like raising your hand. This could be helpful for us. And finally, Lars will present our concluding remarks. So thank you very much for your participation. We are looking forward to the different presentation and the rich exchange afterwards, and I wish you a good event. That was it for, and I will now hand over to Pascal.
Yes, thank you very much, Basilio. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm Pascal from the Knowledge, Learning and Culture Division, which has also recently been designated focal point digitalization at SDC. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present how digitalization is anchored in the different strategic documents of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, which are the different fields of action and those that concern SDC directly. And I will also illustrate with a few examples. In line with the 2030 agenda, Switzerland's International Cooperation Strategy 21-24 aims at using the full potential of new technologies in poverty reduction and sustainable development. And then another document, the Foreign Policy Strategy 2023, also identifies digitalization as a priority, with the aim to positioning Switzerland as an international hub for digital governance. And then the Digital Foreign Policy Strategy 21-24 was elaborated, and its conceptual framework defined clearly 4 fields of action, 2 of which directly concern the SDC. You can see in the slide these 4 fields of action, and the 2 that concern SDC are prosperity and sustainable development, and the second, digital governance. I will go a bit deeper in these 2 aspects. No, please, yes, thank you. We divide this first area, prosperity and sustainable development, into 2 different aspects, tech for good and fintech. Digital transformation is underway in many sectors of activity, including low and middle income countries, services, banking, agriculture, transport, health, and of course, education. SDC encourages digital innovations that respond to proven needs in partner countries. Bridging the digital divide between North and South is a priority. SDC exploits the full potential of new technologies for poverty reduction, the so-called tech for good. SDC also promotes the use of digital technology for sustainable financing. Thanks to fintech solutions, small farmers can, for example, use their cell phones to transfer money, even from remote areas. We have different projects in this area, for example, the AgriFin mobile that provides information, advice, and microfinance services on cell phones to subsistence farmers in Indonesia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Or in the field of migration, SDC supports the use of blockchain technology for reliable money transfer remittances. The second field of action is digital governance. Digital governance is a development issue. Sustainable economic models are required to ensure that the access of digital technologies is equitable and does not contribute to a growing digital divide. SDC strongly advocates for bridging the digital and data divide in order to leaving no one behind and to build robust regulations and frameworks for the responsible use of digital technologies. To this end, SDC engaged in the elaboration and negotiation of key resolution and strategies. For example, SDC supports the development of strong regulations for the responsible use of health data in the negotiations on the WHO's digital health strategy. Or SDC promotes the alignment of actors and better coordination of digital innovation. He created the Geneva Hub for Global Digital Health, for example. And then SDC promotes also the use of digital technologies for greater transparency and better governance. In a nutshell, we can say that at SDC, we do believe that there is no sustainable development without digitalization. However, digitalization is not an end in itself. It is a means and a powerful accelerator to achieve the 2030 agenda. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. These two fields of action, tech for good and digital governance, they are also reflected in another document released in 2019 by SDC. That means 2 years earlier than the other document that I mentioned. This is the SDC strategic orientation for the integration of digitalization in international cooperation. This document adds, as you can see in the slide, another pillars that is internal digital transformation. It's actually the first pillar in the illustration. This aspect is also a crucial for the institution, even it isn't in the focus of this webinar today. But it's very important to say that with the digital transformation within the institution, SDC aims to engage itself in the transformation it advocates for its partner countries. SDC is aiming at adapting its working instruments to the current technical potential, becoming more digital where it is useful. We also aim at transformation, which means not just translate analog to digital, but transform in order to also improve processes, data quality, usability. 3 main core areas have been identified: data management, e-collaboration, and management tools. For example, we have some ongoing projects in this field. For example, the results data management project. In this project, the software is currently being built in order to digitally record and manage results data. We are also in the business orientation phase with regard to several databases and a new version of the sharewebs. And there is a lot of other projects that are ongoing. But all these projects are being conceptualized and implemented in close collaboration with IT FDFA. And I would like to mention that in the beginning of 2022, SDC is going to establish a vision for its internal digital transformation efforts. I think it was also important to mention these pillars that shows that also the institution is proceeding its old transformation. I think I will stop here, and I'm available for question if there is some later. Thank you.
Great, many thanks, Pascal. I think it's very important that we are aligned with this overall strategy, and I'm convinced that in the area of learning, we can use, as you've said, Pascal, ICT for a certain mean to improve learning, inclusive quality learning. So I'm trying to give you some inputs into our experience at SDC. And of course, it's totally impossible to do this in 10 minutes. So I'll try to give you just a short glimpse into what we have experienced. What we've seen is that in the more than 20 projects that have been running over the last 2 years, we have been able to support different forms, learners in different forms, in one-way access, interaction, and collaboration to reach different learning goals. And I mean, this is what we really want. We want to help learners to reach their goals. And we've done this in very different areas, very different ways. One example is from Kosovo, where 27 female farmers have been trained using the Viber app, which was on their phone. And Linda Baletta did a very nice analysis there and looked how do these women communicate. And she used this app to give them access to training material, but also used the app to give feedback, also used phones to ask questions, so that the learners did not only acquire knowledge and comprehend the material, but that they could also reflect on what they have learned and discuss problems, apply what they have learned. Another example is from Mali, where some 1,600 young people and adults were supported in non-formal training in the area of languages and basic skills. And this project has used Android apps, interactive apps, so that these learners could access knowledge again, but that they could also practice with the apps. And the apps are, of course, online, but they also used versions with offline functionalities that could be used on mobile devices, which is very important in areas where you don't have any online access at all. The third example I would like to mention here is 1,200 young people in Honduras who have been supported in a blended learning mode with online training, as you can see with the Zoom picture in the background, where they have been prepared to for the practical phases. So they gained knowledge and they were prepared to apply it in the workshops when the workshops were open. So this is just to say there are very many different ways, and I could go on and on now with more than 20 projects showing how we supported learners in very different ways. You will find the summary in the case collection that Basilia already has mentioned. You'll find it in the files on the right side of this application and can download it there. So I invite you to dig deep there. You will find interesting inputs about what we have learned and what these projects have implemented. I think most of you know that we had 3 communities of practice with about 16 meetings, and we have discussed very many different issues. And I would just like to mention 3 points that I think are important learnings. One thing is that still many people think that e-learning is a one-way method, but what we've seen is that it can be cooperative and motivating. For example, the example from Bolivia, where some 100 directors and teachers have been trained in their digital skills for digital marketing. They could discuss questions online on an online platform. And then I think that's very interesting. The project launched a competition between these some 70 institutions to create a good Facebook social media site to promote their offer. And this was very successful. And these platforms had up to 1,000 followers. And these institutions also learned how to react more quickly to the to the young people they want to reach. Another example which I really like is from Bangladesh. There, a team has reached out to community health paramedics, to 800 paramedics on the Facebook page. And there they have seen that very many people accessed content very quickly. And they also got back feedback and questions. So I think it's a two-way thing there, that you can reach many people quickly and you also understand what their questions are. And finally, the example of Cambodia. There we have cooking assistants who have learned to discuss the preparation of meals over Zoom. And there they created small groups that interacted with the teacher, with a tutor, and he gave them feedback over Zoom and they could discuss. So it was a totally different and new experience for them, and very practical as well. Second point I would like to mention is that I see again and again that people focus quite a lot on platforms, for example. They say, well, you know, we want to do a nice platform and we would like to create a good user experience. This, of course, is very good, but we always have to remind ourselves that we want to reach the learners and we want to understand what's the context of the learners and how do they use the platform, how do they learn, and how do they perform. So here you see different insights into projects that have done this in Ukraine, in Kenya, in I think it is Honduras, the last picture, that have reached and worked interactively with the learners. I'll jump over this slide and finish with this one here. Some projects are surprised that organizational change absorbs a lot of their attention. Of course, we know we work with technology. We try to apply it. We want to support pedagogy, learning, teaching methods. But doing this, we very often change quite a bit of the organization. So I think it's very important to be prepared to see that we need to reorganize how we conduct training, how we support learners, etc. Again, I only could mention three of very many different findings in the tech guide, which you will also find under the slides, under the files in this platform here. You will find a systematic view of how to design and management IC supported learning, and I would like to encourage you to take a look at it. You see many examples at this stage. I just would like to thank very much to all the projects who have contributed to this guide. It's a collaborative work, which you see here with many examples. So much from Switzerland, and I would like to give the word to Björn, who will share some ideas and views on the global perspective that he analyzes from the EdTech Hub. Welcome, Björn. Great that you're here. We can't hear you yet. So this is an example. So while Björn is setting his audio settings, I
should be good now.
Now it's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry
welcome.
about that. It was actually an issue at my end. Apologies. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. I have to say, I love the aspirations from the SDC, and I love this the way you've put the event together. I think these are some very, very important topics. My name is Dr. Björn Hassler. I'm the technical director of the EdTech Hub. The EdTech Hub is a program to undertake research in educational technologies for low-income countries, with a particular focus not just on educational technologies in general, but how these educational technologies contribute to learning outcomes for children. Because there's many things that we can do with technology, and many useful things, but actually the goals that we have, donors have, is to actually improve learning outcomes for children. And that is elusive with digital technologies, with EdTech. Or EdTech is easy to deploy, but to deploying EdTech in a way that is both cost effective and has an impact on learning gains for children is really very difficult. And so with the EdTech Hub, we have 8 years of funding from the UK Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, the World Bank, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to research effective uses of EdTech in low-income countries. Now, Urs asked me to present on some of the global trends and best practices. And I wanted to pull out this categorization, and it's very, this categorization isn't rigorous. So a lot of the work that we do is very rigorous, and we do rigorous literature reviews and do rigorous primary research. But this is a personal view on how we see some of the priority topics, emergent topics, and neglected topics. So let me start with the priority topics. I would say that this informs, or perhaps should inform, the majority of investments and effort. And certainly for the EdTech Hub, these are some of the things that we are looking at. The first one is teacher professional development. This sounds perhaps quite boring. You've asked this person to come and speak, and they're speaking to us again about teacher professional development. Can't we move on to new things? But the problem is that with teacher professional development, there is a huge gap, and this is an evidenced gap, between how teacher professional development is implemented in low-income countries and what we know about effective teacher professional development. Essentially, in low-income countries, as per several reports, we know that while teacher professional development is being implemented, it is not being implemented effectively, right? And it's not just that it goes wrong time after time, it does so by accident. It's not that it goes wrong by accident time after time, but it is because the teacher professional development in low-income countries doesn't follow the established best practices in this space. And sometimes people say to me, yes, but we've done teacher professional development for 20 years now and nothing's changed. It's like, well, if it says on the tin that it's teacher professional development, but you have something else inside the tin, then it's not teacher professional development. And so what we're looking at is how can technology help us get closer to better implementations of teacher professional development. And there's a range of different things that I don't have time to go into, but would love to discuss later. The next one is digital personalized learning. We all love digital personalized learning. The problem is digital personalized learning is not relevant for the most marginalized. Online learning, virtual learning environments, that the whole direction we're traveling with COVID is not relevant for the most marginalized, because the most marginalized don't have access to technology. Yes, but I was in this, peri-urban area in this village, and look, everybody had mobile phones, and can't we do? It's like, yes, but the moment you have a mobile phone, relatively speaking, you are no longer marginalized. I'm not saying that you should have support for doing that, right? But these aren't the most marginalized people. They may still be marginalized, but they're not the most marginalized. I'm being slightly polemic here. But when we look at the UNICEF data from last year, only 50% of people in sub-Saharan Africa had access to learning continuity under COVID. That's lovely. It's great that 50% had access, but the other 50% didn't, right? So the question is, who are we aiming our efforts at? And from an EdTech perspective, we are looking at the most marginalized, and the most marginalized don't have devices. We know that in many deep rural areas, even in terms of non-smartphones in some countries, there aren't many non-smartphones. A few people in the village might have a non-smartphone, but that's it. They might not have coverage. So there's some really deep things here that I think we just gloss over. That we're not really willing to take on board. And so from an EdTech hub, this brings me into the next theme, data for decisions. We're looking at how can we use EdTech in ways that aren't to do with the individual, because the individual doesn't have technology. So we're looking at data for decisions, right? We're also looking at digital content. Why digital content? Because if you create low-cost printable content, you can print, right? Textbooks are too expensive. We could reduce the cost. My personal back of the envelope, not evidence, partially evidence informed, but not rigorous, is that we can reduce the cost of textbooks in sub-Saharan Africa by a factor of 4. In many countries, there are textbooks, but the ratio of students to textbook is about 4:1. In my opinion, there's no reason why every child couldn't have a printed textbook right now. Within the next, if we pull together internationally and can talk more about this, we could, every child could have a textbook, right? So digital content is important, but digital content is important also because it's printable, right? So there are lots of different perspectives on this, and we try and pick out the ones that work. So this is the sort of some of the core topics that I see that we really need to focus on. There are some important emergent topics where we need to think more clearly. Participation and messaging. I do think this is a really important area, and we've seen some encouraging results and some disputed data in this, but I think there is a real space for using SMS messaging, even chatbots, right? So if people have a smartphone, it tends to be a basic smartphone without a lot of space for downloading, without much connectivity. But actually, we saw during COVID also that the people who have smartphones are most likely to use things like WhatsApp. They're not likely to go into a virtual learning environment, right? So there are interesting ways in which you can use messaging, and we need to know more about that and understand better what the effective ways are and how it might impact learning outcomes. Now, I do think we also need to look at effective learning management systems. Those things are being rolled out. We've seen a big expansion over the last decade, even in more and more countries having learning management systems, having EMIS systems, But actually, a lot of the time they're not used very well. Often the narrative is, yes, we have this, we're using it. But when you actually look at it, it's not being used very effectively. An area that I'm a great fan of is this emerging area of geospatial information and education. Better teacher allocation algorithms. I was looking at a paper recently that said significant gains could be had if we move from the current algorithm used in a specific teacher allocation system to a different algorithm. If we move from this existing algorithm to a new algorithm, no change required. Like, how amazing is that? You could just change the way you do the algorithm. You don't need to change any of the technology. You just do some smart mathematical thinking and you change the algorithm. And I think the figure was something like that, there'll be 30% higher teacher satisfaction, and teachers that are married would be able to be closer together and so forth. Now, the country, you might be wondering where that was France. Right? So even in high-income countries, there's obvious efficiency gains to be had in terms of teacher allocation, and even more so in low-income countries. This doesn't require technology at the child level. It doesn't even require technology at the teacher level, but it does require smart thinking and technology at the systems level. But these things are eminently at scale. They're already at scale. So often people say, oh yes, we have this great idea, but it just needs to scale. And like, my extreme opinion, being polemic again for this, so the purpose of this webinar, is things do not scale. If you have an intervention and it works at a small scale and you want to get it to run at a larger scale, my default position is it will not scale. Now, obviously, this is polemic and very broad brush, but the point behind this is, if we want technologies to work, we need to look at the things that already are at scale. Hoping that something will scale or making predictions about how fast something will scale have been shown to be wrong time and time again. So the safest bet for something to scale is not to require it to scale, to look at things that already are at scale. Teachers are more likely to have a mobile phone than students. Let's work with that digital technology rather than trying to hope that students might have technology. So finally, in the last few minutes, some emerging, some neglected topics that I think need more attention. I think we need to think a lot more about education systems. This is sort of emerging, actually, but I think it needs a lot more attention, and I think it needs some really rigorous systems and systemic thinking about how all of these different initiatives interlace and can work together. And I think there's a lot to be done there for donors, because often we don't link up. We need to link up more to get these systemic efficiencies. I do think that the area of disability is really quite neglected in terms of EdTech. And I think disability is actually one of the areas where scaling something small, I'm contradicting myself, will work better, because there's fewer children with manifest disabilities and you could actually do more. Refugees and migrants, I think, also is very important, because actually refugees and migrants often have a device because they need to stay in touch with their family. And again, how could this be capitalized? How could their familiarity with their device be capitalized even for refugees and migrants arriving in Europe? They might have some familiarity. You could support them in learning German, in learning French, and so forth. So this is a quick overview of the different topics. I've taken slightly longer than 10 minutes. Apologies for that, Urs. I would like to hand back to you now, and I look forward to the discussion on this. And I'll be in the chat as well. So if people want to ask questions, I'll look at the chat now and I'll respond.
Great, many thanks, Björn. We already have the first comment from Janine Handel. This is why we need to know and learn more about exciting, scaled and successful initiatives. And I think we will also talk about scaling up. Lars, you can stay with me with the video maybe, and I invite everyone now also to use the chat if you have questions. Let's continue to Grenare, Caritas Switzerland. It's wonderful that you put the focus on education. rather than focusing solely on technologies. Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from you? Okay. Fabienne, could you activate the video of Lars, please? And then we can talk about this. So one thing I would like to ask Björn, you talked about the problems of let me go back here, that digital people don't have devices, learners don't have devices, and I think radio programs is one reflex that we have. Well, they don't have devices, so let's do radio programs. And you also mentioned that messaging is something which maybe is not available for students, but maybe for teachers. And I think there are programs in this area. And I would wonder, what's your experience, or do you know of any studies that have looked at radio programs? How effective are they? How can we design them effectively? Can we maybe complement radio programs with messaging? Are there examples in this area? Now the audio is off again. Yeah. Good.
I think this is a really valid question, and I think firstly, there is some evidence that interactive radio programming, so where radio programming is accompanied by, say, printed materials or is printed by messaging, that certainly works better than radio programming itself. I would say, and a really important lesson in radio programming from Ebola was that, so in West Africa, was that actually even with radio programming, what a simple digital technology, even with that, it's very easy to get things wrong. There were basic things like the radio programming being too fast. I always try to speak slowly in these webinars, and sometimes my partner says, you can stop speaking slowly to me now because you're off the webinar now. But I think it was those really basic things that had gone wrong with it. They were too fast. They were in English when children didn't speak English. So we shouldn't assume that it works. There's instructional design even for radio programming. But I think these are really good approaches. Radio programming, combining radio programming with messaging, with printed materials, in general, using printed materials. Some very few countries sent out printed materials as soon as COVID happened. They used cheap newspaper printing, printed materials, and that was successful. Whereas a lot of other countries said, no, we need to record video and then we need to stream video and so forth. So I think there's some really interesting approaches. I personally think that we need to have better ways of transitioning. And I'm a great fan of the Creative Commons. And when we say we have to pay for copyrighted materials, often the digital cost is separate from the printed cost. And countries that want to digitize have to make the hard choice. We don't have the finance. We're going to have to get printed books. So that means the whole country is locked to printed books. Or we say we just do digital. But then the people that don't have digital don't have the books. If we had more open digital content that was curriculum aligned and structured, we could have much more fluid transitions between radio programming supported by printed materials, where people have phones, they can access these materials on messengers, where people have got digital, they can access these materials in different ways. Educational television. Not everybody has television, but in some countries, television seems to now be a bit more popular than radio, like the Ubongo initiative. These are all great initiatives. Yeah. And I think we need to really urgently strengthen the things that work.
Great, thanks a lot. I see that questions are coming in. This is great. Many thanks. At least one for the moment now. Emmanuel Grunder says that scaling up can be problematic. And what's your stance on this? Do you find the donors are changing their mindsets on this, or he says sometimes grants or projects are given based on scalability. How should we deal with this scalability approach and requirements when we deal with the proposals?
Yeah. So I think the landscape, for instance, during COVID, if we look back 2 years or almost 2 years, right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I think that has led to changes in people's attitudes as well. I think what people are, there were certain narratives that were very prevalent right at the beginning of the COVID epidemic that have now changed because things haven't worked, right? So I think donors are changing their minds. I wouldn't say everyone has changed their minds, but they're slowly changing their minds. I would say that we often talk about scalability, but we need real measures. I think we need to be a lot more critical regarding a proper assessment of scalability, digital principles and all that. I think we also need a much more rigorous assessment of finance. What will it actually cost? Often scalability is an extra box. You write some things in and you say, yes, this will scale if XYZ happens, but there isn't actually a rigorous theory of change. So I would like to see in grant proposals a much more rigorous theory of change, specifically for scaling, and a much more rigorous assessment of the cost per child per year, or the LAYS, the learning adjusted years of schooling, per cost per child, and then put that in the context of the cost that of the finance that is actually available. I could talk a lot more about this, but I think we're making some progress. Yeah, I need to be quicker.
Exactly. Very
I will
tight
answer on the
schedule.
chat as well. If there's other questions,
Many
I will
thanks
answer
for the questions so far. We will try to follow up in the discussion, but for now, I would like to go on. I've asked 3 project leaders to tell us something about your most important achievements that you think you can build on in the future. And the second question was, what's your perspective for promising further development? Because I think we all think, of course, about this. And I would like to invite to give the word first to Erka. She is a deputy lead of Skills for Jobs in Albania of Swiss Contact. Erka, over to you.
Thank you, Urs. Good morning, everyone. Just a few words about Skills for Jobs before I start discussing a bit our approach on blended learning in Albania. Skills for Jobs is an SDC project implemented by Swiss Contact in Albania. It aims to improve access to gainful employment for youth by offering them relevant based on new ways of inclusive learning and in cooperation with the private sector. The project has started in 2016 and is now in its second phase. We work closely with 10 VET institutions in 6 regions throughout Albania. Now, I want to share with you shortly our experience with introducing blended learning in vocational education and training in the country. Introducing blended learning has started initially as a gradual approach in a small scale, so only in few partner providers, but has intensified and scaled up, even though we of course, just learned that scaling up, it's an issue that needs to taken up very seriously and needs the right, let's say, assessment tools and instruments. However, we have intensified the approach since March 2020 with the outbreak of COVID-19 as a necessity to ensure continuation of the teaching process in vocational education schools in the country. Since then, around 8,000 students, that counts for almost 45% of the students at the national level, have been reached and engaged at different levels with blended learning and technologies for education. Most students are using digital learning materials through dedicated virtual platform. Some of them are engaged through project-based learning, flipped classes, and some are taking their level exam, but also formative assessment through digital platforms. Based on our assessment studies, we see that students and teachers alike have boosted their digital and soft skills. Students show an increased motivation, especially among each other. They engage with digital content and are more satisfied with the learning process, with the materials that they are using, and with teaching methods. Teachers, from the other side, also show improvement in their teaching practices, better understanding and use of active teaching methods, digital content, and virtual learning platform. Maybe we can go to the other slide. Some of achievements, the main achievements during this last years of introducing blended learning in vocational education schools in Albania have been the establishment, let's say, of a structured and validated protocol and instruments for developing digital learning content. 2 academic years, teachers and key experts have developed and digitalized around 400 courses or subjects, which are now available for the whole system in an open source platform. The capacitation and hands-on coaching for teachers at national level through different modalities such as face-to-face, hybrid, but also online webinars on different aspects on digital skills, active learning methodologies, online learning, development of digital content, etc. Improvement and further customization of the virtual learning platform, Mosovet, a platform which is in Albanian language. It's an open source and dedicated to vocational schools for virtual learning, which incentivizes interactive learning, serves as a repository for digital learning content, as a monitoring and assessment tool for teachers and school management. The platform has reached a cumulative number of 10,000 users from only 700 users in March 2020. Moreover, the establishment of an online community, which we call Frimusa, which means inspire in English, now has 100 active members that serves as a community of practice that can boost collaboration and the horizontal transfer of knowledge between teachers. Teachers also engage heavily in knowledge sharing events to exchange best practices, experiences, also their responses on challenges that they faced during the pandemic. We can go to the next. Our aim at this point is to capitalize on the experience accumulated and to try to maximize the potential of our achievements. As such, we aim to continue investing in further developing, let's say, digital learning materials in more directions and profiles, serving to higher number of students, to improve the virtual learning platform Mosovet in order to be more flexible, user-friendly, and effective, to establish centers of excellence or educational institutions that excel in different areas such as innovation, entrepreneurship, talent exploration or management, interactive teaching methodologies, private sector engagement, and so on. And to try to tailor an e-learning and blended learning training program, which would be accredited for teachers to be available system-wide. So these are some of the elements I wanted to mention for you today. Thank you all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Erka. And I hand over directly to Leke from Bhutan. Leke, can you please present your project?
Thank you. Thank you, Urs. So in Bhutan case, we have a blended approach as well. We started after the COVID pandemic, where school has to remain closed around March, and immediately the nation was stuck. We used all the approaches to engage our students where the students could not go to school. So through the SDC support, we implemented a project which is basically to provide uninterrupted access to teaching and learning for digitally disadvantaged children. That was our earlier thoughts when we made a proposal. So with the proposal, we managed to combine different modes which includes the video lessons, radio lessons, and most importantly, printed self-instruction materials to continue the teaching and learning process in different schools. We have reached more than 17,000 children. We have produced numbers of videos and put it online. And most importantly, we have used national televisions to broadcast those lessons. However, while using those video lessons through the national televisions, we realized there are a section of students or the places where there's no television, or they do not have access to those facilities, internet facilities, online teaching. So then we had to go for the self-instructional materials, which is being adopted from the adopted curriculum that National Ministry of Education have come up. So that was the initial approach we made to engage the students and as well as teachers in continued process of teaching and learning. However, as mentioned by some of the speakers in the earlier sessions, we were stuck with different challenges. Teachers were not ready, infrastructures were not ready in the school sometimes. So therefore, we had to adopt to different modalities. And most importantly, the spearhead of the ministry, that's called Ministry of Education, made a significant difference in bringing all stakeholders together to ensure the continuity of the teaching and learning process. That was one of the critical factors that made our efforts successful. No single donors, all the agencies could afford to reach out to all the schools. So Ministry of Education brought all the stakeholders together, which includes the national televisions, print medias, private studios, the teachers, volunteer teachers, Royal Education, National Education Councils who look after the curriculum part, to come together and immediately adapt to those challenges within a short span of time. That was the effort we made collaboratively. And gradually, Ministry of Education also created a platform. So learning management systems was being developed to blend this, whatever the resources and materials we prepare during the short span of time, put it online. Those that are not available online, use of different sources like the support of the local government, teachers in the schools to reach out to the students, even through cluster based. They have reached out. They went to the different villages. They went to the different communities, made students to come together and taught them the lessons that are based on the adapted curriculum. So these were some of the achievements. And when it comes to the way forward in terms of things, immediately the realization was that it's about the effectiveness and standardization. The questions were asked on the effectiveness, the questions were asked on the curriculums, whether it is reliable, relevant, or it is of the quality that are being seen. So therefore, all the stakeholders came together to develop a new normal curriculum, which again focus on both face-to-face learning as well as a e-learning programs combination. So they created a platform, and we did assessment. We did evaluations of those interventions, and we found out that majority of the students, principals, students, and the parents felt that it gives the most effective alternatives during the COVID or during the education in emergency time. So building on that learning, and they created a learning management system that blends, and then accordingly they adopted a teacher professional development program, which focuses not only on the face-to-face teaching, but also the use of the platforms, ICTs, Google Classrooms, and then different other platforms. However, there were challenges in terms of digital gap. So that is one concern that has been raised in terms of rural places not being able to access, or even if they access, the higher data charges, the charges that were not being able to bear by their parents were some of the issues raised. And for that also, the government made an intervention to subsidize the charges for educational purposes. So these are some of the way forward. And most importantly, the partnership approach was the critical factors that we learned during this process, because no single agencies could take over single-handedly to reach out to the students. So therefore, the collaborations was most important. And even like different televisions now have come up with the third educational channel, basically to continue those e-learning platforms and digital platforms to reach to the children. Yeah, these are some of the achievements we made and the way forward that are being thought of. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Leke. It's really a non-stop train that's going on here, and I hand over the word now to Ilona and Olena from Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Urs. Hello, dear colleagues. Together with Elena, we are happy to present to you our experience from Ukraine, from our e-governance project. So just to set the scene, in Ukraine, we do not have a separate domain on education, but actually education is definitely cross-cutting, and in each of our projects, we have a very strong educational component. And exactly the same situation we have within our project eGAP, e-governance for accountability and participation. So within this project, we support the ambitious digital transformation reform agenda of the Ukrainian government. And our project focuses on the support of digitalization of administrative and social services, and provision of e-democracy instruments that help to help interaction between the government and citizens. And of course, while the government is expanding the supply of e-services, which are really more than easy to use, really important, they help to cut possible corruption. It is essential that the demand side is also there, and that citizens are able to use these innovative tools, and which really simplify their life, and and in the long run also build trust to the state. So in this context, jointly with the government, we engaged into the establishment of the platform, which is called Digital Education DEA. So DEA is the national brand for the digital transformation in Ukraine. And this platform is actually not only just web-based platform, but a platform in the sense of an ecosystem, because while having this online interface, this is a very complex system that integrates multiple stakeholders, fully driven by the government, and really helps to reach out to all possible parts of the population, starting from children and ending up to senior population, thus really ensuring this life learning education process. So this platform has a number of courses which are actually made in the innovative format of edutainment. These are mini soap operas with a series, and in between series you have questions, tests, and only after passing these tests you come to the next series. So it is very light. Also in each of these courses you have celebrities, TV stars or musicians, politicians or actors or famous people from private sector, bloggers. So they deliver content on various topics in a very easy way, very down to the earth, and very practical. So all these courses are structured and targeting concrete audiences. And right now we already have over 1 million users, registered users on this platform. We have up to 70 educational soap operas or courses targeting multiple audiences. But what is also important, in order to bring people online, we need to go first offline. So that's why this platform is also connected with regional hubs, digital education hubs in all municipalities of Ukraine. We have like public libraries, or we have centers for provision of administrative services, and in these hubs, these are actually the first interface for people who want to come online and learn digital skills, so they can get offline education in their municipality directly. And we have a number of like ambassadors or trainers, digital literacy trainers, which are right now more than 2,000 people all over Ukraine, who really deliver these materials to people who want later on to join the platform and turn online. So as of our achievements, so we really managed to create one-stop shop for digital education, which is covering the whole country. We managed to really tailor the courses to the needs of various target audiences. So we have courses, let's say, for school children who right now want to become bloggers, and there is a special course how to become a YouTube blogger or TikTok blogger. So in such a way, children are attracted to the platform. But there are also courses how to escape cyberbullying online, because this is also an issue. There are specified courses for public servants, and here it's important to say that these courses are certified and they are linked to the like qualifications of public servants. If they pass the course and get the certificate, they immediately get additional score and can advance in their public service career. There are also courses for senior population, where the famous actress, which is so loved by many people in Ukraine, she presents how to find recipes online, or how to communicate with grandchildren, how to make calls to relatives abroad, etc. But there are also courses that help, let's say, people who during lockdown decided to change their career. They can also reach out to a variety of professional orientation courses. So the platform really combines online, offline, but also the courses are right now broadcast on TV channels, and it became the hub for partnerships between multiple stakeholders, be it the state, regional authorities, civil society, academia, but also the private sector. For example, we have companies who finance, like MasterCard, finance the development of the course on financial literacy, which is also essential. And now we come to the final slide on our future plans. So indeed, the platform is already very popular, but the goal of the ministry is to, by the 2024, to have more than 6 million people improving their digital skills. So our goal is indeed to popularize this platform even more, to reach out to those who might not be covered with our offline activities even more, and also develop targeted courses that can interest like population that think that we already know a lot about digital skills, but there are still a lot more to learn and to become more proficient in certain areas. Also among our plans is to use artificial intelligence, which will help to make the platform even more interactive and will attract more audience to it, and of course expand it even to a bigger range of partners, and engage more also private sector, because we see that there is a very powerful win-win when both the state and the private actors engage, because then they are able to really cater to the needs of their customers, to the needs of the citizens. And also we plan to expand the range of categories. For example, already now there is a course for doctors, because digital skills for different professions differ, so it would be really good to expand these special courses for different professions, and in such a way the whole nation could be really digitally literate, and use all the benefits which are offered right now by the state in terms of the new digital services and e-democracy tools. So I would stop here, and jointly with Elena, we will be ready to answer your questions.
Great, many thanks, Ilona. Now, I've seen that in the chat we already had a few questions and conversations. Björn has also answered, so I invite you also to ask questions to the presenters of the projects now. I would like to take up one discussion that Björn and Roman have in the chat. So what's one point is the value for money scalability, where you respond, Björn, to Roman and say, well, for rural learners, it's problematic. And I wonder what are feasible approaches to reach rural learners. Maybe Björn, you can, if this is possible, start very quickly with a short statement, and we can also share the experience of Bhutan, where you work a lot with rural learners. So I would be interested, how do you reach them? What are good means to reach rural learners? Maybe Leke, you can start. I can't see Björn yet.
Okay, for Bhutan, I think, as you said, we have worked with most of the rural schools. The most feasible one for those who don't have access to digitals are teachers reach out. We make it a cluster base, and then we encourage schools and the local governments to partner and reach out to those students. So these were one of the approaches. And second approach we took was to get a support of the parents. We realized that the support of the parents is very important, especially for the lower classes, grade 3 and below, because even if there are platforms, e-platforms, it's very difficult for the younger the children to cope up to those. So there we found out that the support of the parents is very critical to reach out to those students or the children. So the use of social media apps, especially here in Bhutan, Telegram, WhatsApp, and the popularly Chinese app called WeChat is being used in many of the remote places. So teachers use those platforms to reach out to the students, not only in terms of giving the lesson. Every class teachers meet each group in those platform, in those WeChat groups. So they give the works, they collected the work, they assess, they correct it, they correct it, and then even they give back. Even those students who do not have even access to those social media app, then the best option we found out was the cluster based reaching out by the teachers. Yeah.
Okay, great. So a combination also of print material, local printed material, social apps for teachers to guide them. Björn, would you like to add something to this, your perspective?
I completely agree with that. I think those are the right approaches.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah. Ilona, with your hubs that you have, I think they must be in very different areas, very rural areas in cities. Did you realize that there are differences, or how could you reach the rural population with your program? What's your experience with this?
Thank you, Urs. Well, in Ukraine, SDC actually, with SDC, we focus on rural territories primarily, all our programs. So for us, it is the key target audience. And indeed, so the internet coverage, it is improving very rapidly, but still, yeah, like in rural areas, it's not ideal. There is still a lot work to be done, but there are, let's say, libraries, or at least the premises of municipalities, which also have like open space, or the so-called houses of culture, like community centers, and there, so we actually established these hubs. So they are already there, they have internet, and what is needed is just to train the people who are servicing, like librarians or administrators, and then they become these digital ambassadors. But also what is important is to always have this feeling of a network. The ministry right now makes a fantastic job, because they really work on the establishment of the ecosystem. So they try to convene different meetings. Now it's, of course, everything online. It's easy. You can immediately connect the whole country with one Zoom or meeting, or some YouTube webinar. And then people feel this feeling of belonging. They already compete how many certificates they personally have, how many courses they passed, and how they share this knowledge further. So creation of a network, of a belonging, and having one common cause, because all of us are working to improve the quality of life of citizens by digital means. So this helps really to advance quite rapidly.
Great, thanks a lot. And these intermediaries, I think this is a big topic in rural areas, how to reach these intermediaries, which Roman has mentioned in the chat. I think that's a very interesting field to further discuss. Janine is adding, in the current phase of Let a Thousand Blossoms Blow, what can we recognize already now as developments which will not be compatible in the sense of harming cost efficiency? So, Björn, you know a lot of studies about what's not working. So now we're interested what we should avoid.
Yes. I mean, I might also say, I mean, we have a huge diversity on this call, right? So I'm really talking about the lowest income countries. So, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and so forth, and the lowest income areas in those. And I think it's, horses for courses, different things work in different places. But having said this, I think this issue of opportunity cost is a really serious one. We're making big investments in personalized learning from a research perspective, from an implementation perspective, and we just have to get real, so to speak, if I may use that phrase. We just have to get real about the fact that, for the most marginalized in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, that isn't going to make a difference. It is not going to make a difference. So I think there are a lot of things around this personalized use of technology for children that just isn't going to work. And I think, like I've said, people are waking up to that, but I think it's really important to kind of realize that. I think there's also, there are some, you asked about studies. I mean, there's some good studies, I can send some links later, that look at what is actually the optimum amount for a child to use digital technology. And actually, there's I can't think of the authors right now, but I posted in the chat. There's a trade-off in the sort of education efficiency function, that it isn't actually efficient to learn 100% with digital technology, even for children in the UK, in Europe, in Switzerland. That isn't actually the best use of technology. So there's lots of considerations that come into this. I do think the opportunity cost is really serious. I've heard people say early in COVID, it's better to do something. We know this isn't going to work, but it's better to do something, or we have doubts that this will work. It's better to do something than to do nothing. That is not true. Right? We know that some education interventions have negative impact on learning because you're pulling teachers away, from the classroom. So I think we need to bring more evidence to this. We need to think about all of this much more clearly.
And involve this in the analysis phase very carefully to avoid these pitfalls. Yeah, thank you very much, Björn. Maybe as a last point of discussion, I would like to come back to the scaling up. And I mean, we have very many projects here supported by SDC, and the ones presented really have a national approach. But I see differences that in Ukraine, you develop very quickly on a national, you started on the national basis and you connected people and you started nationally. And with Albania, I see more the approach of starting with a few schools and scaling up now. And the question for me is, for both approaches, starting small, scaling up, and starting on a national level on a big scale already, what do you think, in your view, are the biggest risks of both approaches? So maybe what's the risk of your approach when you start nationally? What's your risk, Erka, of your approach starting with a few schools and then trying to scale up? Difficult question. Can I tease you with this?
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, difficult and very interesting, actually. When I started, like with a small scale, as I mentioned, trying to really shift the mindset and start small with some star teachers, let's say, and so on and so forth. This was like the approach, and we were trying to reach a higher number of students and teachers really slowly. But somehow the pandemic kind of changed everything. Because we have created like a basis for at least 9 partner providers. We had a digital platform. We had started with developing of digital learning material that could be used not only by the S4J, let's say, partner providers, but also by a larger number of providers. And the risk was to really be a bubble within the system. So create like capacities and technology within only few, let's say, providers, and then the rest would be like foreign to this environment. And I think we tried also to address this and to change this by trying to support this community of practice. So it was not us or the system who demanded the change, but it was really teachers within each other who started to exchange and to really respond to challenges based on their experience. And of course, like I heard also the discussion before, I think we are, I'm happy to hear that we are almost at the same page. We'll try while trying to reach to more people, and also, especially to the most, let's say, vulnerable groups. So we were very skeptical at the beginning not to develop digital learning material that could be printed out. But we have changed the mindset because it was difficult for everyone to to use these materials. So now they can be printed out and they can be used also only by the teacher in the classroom through a mobile phone or through a projector. So the students can be there and can use them even though they don't have access in their homes. So all of this, I think, has been the measures we have taken to have a slow and smooth scaling up approach.
Yeah, and to tackle these challenges. Yeah, thank you very much, Erka. Ilona, from the other perspective, where do you see the challenges and how did you tackle them?
Thank you, Urs. Actually, Switzerland and Ukraine is like a very big supporter of decentralization. So we have a very big portfolio of projects supporting really decentralization reform in Ukraine. But with our support to digital transformation, we realized that actually the best way is actually to centralize, because with digital tools, you immediately get economy of scale. You immediately get rid of the risk of incompatibility of different systems, and having a unified approach, unified standards to roll out of digital tools, instruments. This becomes much more efficient. For example, the cost of our platform, it is 100,000 Swiss francs. Like it's like IT platform as such, but each course, like the cost is from 5,000 to 10,000 Swiss francs, but it reaches out immediately to thousands and thousands of people. So this, starting from the national level helps to reach very serious cost benefit ratio, and to avoid the risks of incompatibility of different systems.
Great. Okay. Would be very interesting to continue, but I'm afraid we are at the end of this webinar, or turning towards the end. I would like to invite you to click on vote on the right side of the screen. And there you should see a voting question. What were the presentations and the discussion inspiring for you? That was our goal today, and we would like you to vote very quickly. Very inspiring, somewhat inspiring, not very inspiring. Be honest, please. We can't see who's saying what, so that we see not inspiring at all is also an option. For us, it's interesting to see how you vote. Yes, they are coming in. So I'm very glad to see that a majority of the voters say that it's very inspiring. So thanks to the presentations presenters for this. And actually, yeah, now it's published. I think. Can everyone see it? We have a strong vote on very inspiring. And then we change to the second question, which Fabienne is actually now entering. And this is about the application. Let me see. I'm actually looking for the question which I have misled. Here we go. So I'm just waiting for the next question. Here it is from Fabienne. Do you think that you will be able to apply something that you've learned in the last 90 minutes? And again, yes, probably, maybe, or no, not at all. That's for us very important that you can apply what we're talking about, because we want to reach an effect with what we're doing at SDC in the area of ICT supported learning. Okay, this is great. Thank you very much. And with this poll, I would like to hand over to Lars. I thank all the participants from my side, and Lars will say something about the next steps and close the meeting.
Thank you very much, Urs. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are. My name is Lars and I'm a member of the Inclusive Economic Development Team in Bern. I believe we had a very rich and stimulating program in learning in today's webinar. It was also proven by the polls that we just had. We got 3 examples from the field on how they had to adapt their programs to vocational training and education because of Corona. And the teams were incredibly creative, fast, and they had to build a digital solution for thousands of students. This is also shown in the new tech guide and the 16 cases studies presented today. It's a real achievement, and I would like to congratulate to all the teams out there in the field. And it's also worth to download the documents and have a look at them. You can either download them here, but also you can download them on our share webs. We also got global developments and digitalization from Björn, as well as from Pascal on our internal project of the SDC learning organization that is eager to drive innovation. I believe this provides good opportunities and learning between the headquarters and field on learning and digitalization, and we should take advantage of these opportunities. During this journey on digitalization and learning, but also during this webinar, I have noted 3 keywords that stuck to me. That is trends, dynamics, and flexibility, or let's say adaptation.
I see that the sound is interrupted of Lars. Let's maybe wait for a second for his last words. And otherwise, I will close the meeting now. And actually, for those who are still here, we are over time now, I'm aware of this. What we would be very interested from you is to get a quick feedback in the chat to say what was the most interesting point that you get. So as a self-reflection for yourself, when you look back, what was the most important and most interesting thing? That's one thing I would really appreciate if you could type in a few keywords in the chat. And the second thing we are very interested in is to hear from you. Are there any open questions that you would like us to address in the future that you think are worth discussing in this community? We've had quite a long way together, and of course, we're always interested to go on. Here he is, Lars. I just asked the 2 final questions, but I think you can't hear me anymore. Okay, so from my side, thank you very much for the participation. Please use the chat. I will stay here for a few minutes. Also, if you have questions, I can respond to this. And thank you for your participation. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.